Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Quite the conclusion to the first weekend of qualifiers here for Major 4. 4 games on the Sunday for what feels like probably is the first time this season, and quite the way to close out the weekend. A top 4 matchup, an OpTic versus Vegas game that we most certainly have to dive into. Drama today, arguably from start to finish. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, just quickly on HCS London, of course, concluded today. OpTic made the finals, but did not get the victory here, of course, with Formula. They played FaZe. This FaZe team is looking unbelievably good. Frosty played ridiculously well today, and as Scump says, hell of a tournament, guys. Obviously, they've got Penguin, as he was formerly known, now Dead Zone, on that OpTic team, and they played very well. They took maps off FaZe, which I'm not sure anyone had really done, at least much, so far in the tournament. Of course, they got 3'd in the winners' semi-finals. The thing is with Halo, of course, that it's a double best of 7 grand finals, and OpTic were coming from losers after beating Shopify Rebellion 3-0. So, beating FaZe in a single best of 5, that is possible. Beating FaZe in 2 best of 7s, I think that was a massively tall order. I know that Trippy came out and said, look, my bad for the finals, but still, OpTic versus FaZe in the grand finals, like, we have been used to that lately, and it may well still happen at the upcoming major in Burbank, it seems, California, with no fans, unfortunately. Let's talk about some of the series. Surge versus Minnesota Rocker. I thought Surge would win this. I wasn't sure that it would be this clean, to be honest. Yes, it was a big ice factor here from aBeZy in the round 11 to put them up 2-0, but nonetheless, Surge are just like the way better team than Minnesota Rocker. It's the factor again. Rocker, okay, well done, you beat Boston, but that doesn't count, right? Beating Boston doesn't count right now, and we'll see why here in a second. So, big 1v1 here for aBeZy against Standy in the round 11, gets the win, puts them up 2-0. Surge are a lot of fun to watch. This series was rapid as well. They play at breakneck speed, Seattle Surge, and it works out really well for them. And aBeZy, it's got to be said, since they made the change, putting him to the AR, I don't know why it wasn't the case at the start of the season, whatever, only Rambo seems to know the answer to that one, and they just straight 3-0 these guys. 5th best team in the league, I would say, basically guaranteed at this point. Accuracy's camera goes flying, as is quite often the case, and it wasn't even a close control either. So, a dominant 3-0 victory here for the Seattle Surge, and as O4 puts in the background, Rookie of the Year, right, to aBeZy, and I think there is a very compelling case here to make. The start of the season, Linz was the front runner, then it became Gwyn, there was even talk about Geo, or even Purge at one point, okay, that was probably a bit out there, but when, you know, Vegas had their resurgence, there was talk about those guys getting involved, but now in this part of the season, Surge are becoming the, pretty much I would say, the clear contender to the top 4. Okay, Thieves are there or thereabouts as well, but at the LAN, Thieves top 8, Surge top 6, so there is that to consider, but I do think that aBeZy is kind of stamping his name on it to some degree now. Gwyn is probably still just about number 1 for me, but if things continue as they have done, aBeZy I think will be the Rookie of the Year, taken after Scrappy in many respects, because a very similar player in terms of numbers and performance in challenges last year, and then, you know, here we go again. Not a pretty series with Minnesota Rocker, right? They go to 1-1, and surprising to me, they didn't at least consider some sort of move, right? It's kind of been known that they could have done, they could have decided to make some sort of move, but well, they opted against it. I think even Ronnie actually pointed out right here that back in the end of May, they were saying, yeah, Looney is technically our substitute, we could have signed an alternative, we haven't, and we don't think it's a necessity. So they contemplated moves, they haven't made any moves, and, you know, I don't think it's going to work out especially well for them, I'm not going to lie. Let's talk about this Boston series though, because if there's one team that's actually worse than Minnesota Rocker, it is these boys, and their record is actually so bad. Like, I'm pretty sure the last series they won was in the Stage 2 qualifiers, which is a very long time ago, and they've not won anything since then. Their record is genuinely getting down there with the worst records that we have seen actually in CDL history, and even Thieves love going up 2-0, but when it comes to going a 3-0 or a 3-1, they don't like to do that. They like to go game 5. And obviously, if you're Boston, you go down 2-0, you know it's chalked because you got to win in 5 and you can't win in 5 because they don't win their game 5s. But Ghosty dominated the Vista Hardpoint. They won the search. They won the control, and it was a very swift 3-0 for the Los Angeles Thieves. I think the issue for Boston is that they brought in Major Maniac. The feeling seems to be at Boston that they actually still had a chance to qualify for the World Championship. Like, that was the talk from Boston that, you know what, we're going to put our heads down, we're going to be able to make the run and we're going to make it. The problem is that when they lost the other day, and certainly when they lose today, immediately the realization sinks in, they ain't making it. So I think maybe it was like an expectations versus reality thing. If Major Maniac came in thinking, all right, Champs is probably chalked, we've just got to do the best we can, they might be in a different spot now to what they are, but but I mean, he got fried today. And as Slasher says, insane to watch. Could be eye-opening for the ignorant people, though. Probably not. But whatever, off to the gym. So, yeah, Slasher talking about the decision makers at the Boston Breach. They've made this decision. Slasher, of course, is gone. I don't know if they've even won since Slasher left, to be honest. And now Major is in. A change that was meant to improve their search and destroy, but they lost another search and destroy. There was even talk here from Parasite, is this one of the worst ever leagues in terms of skill? It's one of the most top-heavy leagues, absolutely. But the teams at the bottom are just bad, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more tomorrow in, some other reactions to it. Slasher certainly has his thoughts, and I imagine his thoughts somewhat related to the situation on the Boston Breach as it stands. A clean 3-0 for the Los Angeles Thieves. Finally, they get a nice one on the board, and it's a pretty nice 3-0 to get. 10 points in the bank, and as Boston say, yeah, their champs run is over. They'll be grinding the Black Ops 6 Alpha instead of being in the World Championship, right? So I think now it's basically set in stone for Boston. I mean, it was before, but now it certainly is. They've got to figure out, okay, where do we go from here? Because Major isn't really performing either, and that is the problem, right? Because they brought in Major to say, okay, could these guys do well in Search and Destroy? Could they help that duo, maybe of Snoopy and Beans, become the players that they could be for the franchise in the longer term? Doesn't seem the case so far. Maybe time will tell, but they've got some time to figure out what the hell are they going to do next year, because they're going to play 5 more qualifiers, they're going to play the Major, and that's going to be it. And by then, they've got to have some idea what they're doing in the off-season, because it's got to be a lot. And look at their records. The last couple of years, they've been, there or thereabouts. But this year, they're 5-22, and this is down there with one of the worst records ever. It's not quite Vanguard Paris Legion, 2-23, 8%, like 8% is actually so bad, is it? But, look at all these other ones. The other worst teams were 25% win rate, 26% win rate in that ballpark. Boston are in the, the teens. They're in the single figures. Okay, apart from Paris, 18.5. It's, not great. And obviously, many of those losses have come absolutely in a row. These were the overall numbers. And, again, I think Beans and Snoopy, I mean, this is just such a standard series right now. Beans and Snoopy deliver some damage. They deliver some kills. They show promise as players, either on Boston or elsewhere in the future. Priestahh generally has a bit of a harder time now on the sub, and then Major's just kind of getting cooked. And, the loss in the Search and Destroy was obviously the dagger. Ghosty had a 1.5. It is what it is. Then we got, though, a top 4 matchup. FaZe versus New York Subliners. And this genuinely felt like Titans clashing, kind of for the first time. Look, New York beat FaZe earlier this season, but this was the first time in some time where Kismet had a real takeover series. We saw him say the other day, he needs to get back in that bulldog mentality, because it's not like players with Kismet's ability and what he was doing last year, they don't just disappear. It's still in there somewhere, but you can't always get it seems. But Kismet had a great series today, and the frustrating thing will be for New York is that he had a great series, and yet they still managed to find a way to lose the series. They win the game 1 on the Vista, very tough to do against FaZe, but then they lose the Search. And this was the key thing for Search, or the key thing for FaZe in Search. This is what Tupac, of course, their S&D coach, was saying, that they're back, They lost all those searches at the Major, and that was the difference maker for them. Their respawn was great, but their Search and Destroy was woeful at the Major and even slightly before, and that was costing them. They come into this series, win 2 Search and Destroys, but the respawns were not exactly slam dunks, and I think it certainly shows that FaZe are somewhat vulnerable. They do lose the Search. Cellium again didn't have a phenomenal series, but it's interesting that that is now happening because Drazah is cooking. And look, for anyone that says Drazah's the problem, you've got to get rid of him for Scrappy or whatever, and maybe there are outside of the game problems, the girlfriend stuff, we've talked about it, but in the game, Drazah's been, apart from Simp, arguably their best player as of late, and he absolutely cooked in this control, but they still lost the control. This guy dropped 47 kills in the control, a new single map kill record in this game for the loss. They get reverse swept in the control by the Subliners, and that's enough to put them up 2-1 in the series. And New York, absolutely in hindsight, will feel they should have closed this one out, because they were on the verge of winning this one. Look, they had to bring the comeback, but they pretty much locked down the entirety of this P2. This was the way the game was playing out. New York Subliners had the full rotation, they got the kills where they needed it, and then they were in a perfect position right about here. Skyz even gets 1, then he goes down. Skyz had a pretty rough time, to be fair, but this was the moment here. To be honest, it was this specific gunfight. Simp versus HyDra. HyDra gets gunned by Simp, and that kill kind of sets the train rolling. But then Subliners, they don't really team up properly. They're not team fighting it quite right, and all they've got to do is lock down the first 10 seconds of this rotation. They get caught out 1 by 1, and FaZe get in and they win the game, and they go on to win the series as well because they take the game 5. So a very tough way to lose that series for the Subliners. Interestingly enough, when they first lost 3 times in a row back in 2023, it was to Ultra, OpTic, and to Subliners, and it was kind of similar to, of course, happening again today. But yeah, that's the thing, is Kismet says GG's FaZe. He played lights out this series. 114 kills for Kismet, 108 kills for HyDra, 103 for Simp, 109 for Drazah. Like, this really was a titanic matchup in many ways, and kind of the first time that I felt like Subliners, wow, like they really look good here, especially in the hard points. And that was the difference when Kiz stood upright. I mean, when Kiz had a great series, most damage in the lobby apart from Drazah, like, that was the difference as we kind of saw last year at times. Skyz had a bit of a rough one, but you know, in terms of damage, it wasn't absolutely horrendous, and aBeZy definitely had more of a series to forget, but they won the 2 search and destroys, and that will be pretty critical for them as they go forwards, because that was their weakness. If FaZe figure out search, it's scary for the opposition, but it's not like they're unbeatable now in the respawns, so that might be the to and fro that FaZe have to deal with. But certainly not the conclusion to the day's action that I was expecting. OpTic Texas play Vegas Legion to close out the day. I was thinking, wow, okay, why is this the final series of the day? Right, it's going to be a clean smoke show for OpTic Texas. Not the case at all, even though even the COD League themselves, they tweet out sub-base hardpoints with the sob in phase, crying emoji, whatever, basically saying that's going to be a clean smoke show for OpTic. Not to be, as we shall dive into. Now, it seemed like the OpTic boys, I don't know, there was something going on today that prevented them from maybe getting there on time, or they didn't get the warm-ups in. Certainly, Shotzzy and Dashy didn't seem to be especially warmed up for this one, because Shotzzy started this map 4 in 17, and this, I think, is how it goes sometimes with the top teams. In the same way that when FaZe, they lost to Gorillas a while ago, which was highly surprising. Toronto just lost to Surge just the other day. That was probably more so Surge being good, as maybe arguably it was here for Legion, but often you'll get situations, especially online, with OpTic Texas, Kenny's like, look, online doesn't matter, and that is true in large part. But at the same time, often you'll come into a series like this, you'll think it's going to be a clean smoke show. What's the point even, you know, warming up or getting ready for it? They come in, they get caught off guard game 1, and Vegas take them down on the sub-base hardpoint. This has been the dominant map for OpTic so far this season. They have not lost it this year, OpTic Texas, and they come in and get effectively crushed out of the park here by the Vegas Legion. So they came to play today, and I think they realized, Vegas, there was an opportunity here if they played really well, and they need the points on the board as well. This result really makes the World Championship fascinating, because, like, it says something about OpTic for sure. Have they fallen off since the major? Not as far as I'm concerned. This was just a poor series for them today, and then have to analyse exactly why. This was kind of interesting, I'm not going to lie, that we get a picture here from the COD League. Shotzzy just dropped a 0.45 KD on sub-base, which is, you know, I don't know, do we often do this for other players that have bad maps from the official COD League account? Not necessarily. I thought it was interesting. People are saying, oh, their impression farms. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. This is pretty funny. I saw this going around here from Standy, this storm in Dallas, because they're struggling around. Maybe it was storm related, I don't know, because they were having like power outage issues and internet and all of this stuff with the rain and everything that's happening in Dallas. I hope everyone's okay out there where the storms are happening right now. But yeah, they were screwing up OpTic's net, apparently, says Standy, and OpTic go down 1-0. They do bounce back nicely though. They win the search and destroy, but they take it to a high-rise control where they looked on the verge of winning, but yet again we have this problem. So the propane barrels, the giant exploding propane tanks, were meant to be fixed now. That's what we heard. That was what they told us, that they were solved and they were no longer going to blow anyone up in ranked modes or in CDL matches itself. That was clearly a lie, or at least they intended to do it, and it hasn't worked, because here's Shotzzy blowing himself and Dashy up. And this was actually very critical to the way this game went. And people are saying, oh, that, you know, they should have replayed it or whatever. But look, it is what it is. It is how the game is. But like, this is such an important moment here, right, for OpTic Texas. They're up 1-0. They look like they're in good position to take an offensive round win. this is why the propane tanks are not meant to explode. But Shotzzy comes in here, Pred comes in here, the propane tank explodes, it takes them both down, or at least takes Dashy down. Pred's last alive on the hill, they lose the rounds, they eventually lose the game. They actually lost an offense, or defense, sorry, they actually let Vegas win an offense, so I don't know why this happens so often, that round 5 defense just seems to be a curse, but that's what happens again here. So Vegas take this one, OpTic bounce back and win the game 4 on the Vista, and it looked for all the worlds to me they were going to win the game 5. They started up 1-0, they had a 1v3 against Nero, but this just shows, like, I don't think that OpTic on LAN does this, but I think that this is just one of these things that happens online, because, I mean, here comes Kenny flying out from the top. Pred comes out for the trays. Clearly the call out wasn't very good here, because even with red dots he's looking the wrong way. Then he looks right and gets guns. Now all of a sudden it's a 1 versus 1 and Dashy's got a hard time winning this one. Maybe they heard him, you know, maybe Nero heard him, I don't know. But he got the kill, and that was a 1 versus 3. That massively changed the tide. But it was this moment here, right? Look, Kenny being the first to die, does he need to fly out here? Probably not. But it's the second kill right here on Pred. That was just a straight up mistake there from OpTic that probably wouldn't have happened if they were really locked in the series, and they go on to lose the game 5. So Vegas Legion pick up an incredibly important 10 points here in the CDL. OpTic go down, certainly something to say on that. Johnny's hitting an emote here, by the way. Here he goes, popping the L up on, which is just hilarious, honestly. We've got the video of it as well, and when I saw this I was like, okay, you know, massive for Vegas, and you know, this is going to happen 5% of the time probably, that this type of upset actually occurs, and Vegas capitalize. But it is Johnny hitting the emote, and I'm sure that Pred is probably looking at this, having a note, and trying to figure out what he does, let's say at the major, if they were to play each other, which is potentially possible now that we see Vegas plausibly starting in the winner's bracket based on this result. They played Toronto and OpTic this weekend, they go 1-1. That is not bad at all. So I'm sure there'll be more to say on this from the OpTic side tomorrow, but that was a fascinating series, and frankly, weekend of COD to close out with. There have been lots of these online qualifiers over the last several months that have been so dull to watch, but thankfully this weekend, we finally started getting some game 5s, some upset victories, and it does make things really interesting as we go towards the World Championship. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.